The founding really started with a little apartment dinner invitation by Mel Joss.
That society was really Dr. Mel Joss's beginning. He was the stimulus. He was the one that really thought that this is the way a society should be formed. And he had other people that he gathered together whom he knew was doing foot surgery in New York and elsewhere, and knew me because I was doing an instructional course. He was the impetus.
Well, Mel Joss lived his life fully for the society. His whole passion in life was around his intellectual pursuit, surgical pursuit of improving foot and ankle care worldwide.
Mel Joss sent invitations to people he knew who had been really committed to foot and ankle, academically giving talks and so forth, and he invited them to come to his apartment one evening to put their heads together to try to initiate a society related to the foot. Nicholas Gianestris from Cincinnati, and Joss was in New York. Nat Gould from Boston, at that time Brockton. Paul Lapidus, also from New York. We had Hampart Kalikian from Chicago. Joseph Milgram from New York. Did I mention Bob Joplin? He was from Boston.
He had at his meeting many of the future presidents of the society, and at that meeting they laid down the foundation for the Foot Society as we know it. The driving force, again, was something very intellectual. He saw this as an opportunity to really improve the world.
So they started sending out invitations to people who would want to be interested in the Foot Society. And they scheduled a meeting in May, again, of 1969.
I think there was something in the neighborhood of about 46 of us that showed up in Chicago for that meeting. Gianestris, Milgram, Kalikian, Dr. Hirsch from New York. Names at my age don't come easily.
The founders that got together selected Bob Joplin as the initial president and Nicholas Gianestris as the president-elect.
Certainly the original Foot and Ankle Society was run by a group of older-time foot and ankle surgeons who were a really interesting group of characters and really fun to watch. From Gianestris to Brahms and Joss and all these guys were interesting, certainly increased my interest in the foot.
The first meeting that I went to was actually as a guest. I was still a resident. These greats that I consider who had founded the organization were there, and I listened to them talk and tried to understand a bit about the foot and ankle, but there was no such an individual thing existed. They were just starting as a club, mostly.
When I went into foot and ankle surgery and I didn't have a fellowship, it was very unusual for someone to specialize in the foot and ankle.
And the majority of the programs around the country at that time did not teach foot and ankle at all. I spent a lot of time going to these different programs as a guest lecturer and started teaching foot and ankle. And when you go there, you can get the residents fired up and interested in foot and ankle. And by doing that, I think that's the way we got things started.
I was a resident in orthopedic surgery, and I went to my first AOFAS specialty day. It was part of the academy up in San Francisco. It involved an offer of a fellowship by Nicholas Gianestris, who was starting the first one-year foot and ankle fellowship in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that, of course, was a step off into a long career for me in foot and ankle orthopedics.
I just happened to present a paper back in 1975 that won an award called the Albert Plinkett Award, and it ultimately was supplanted by the Roger Mann Award. But Nick Gianestris, who was one of the founders of the society, came up to me later and said, "You know, you're a nice chap. You seem like you're interested in foot and ankle. You ought to consider joining our society."
At that time, when I was president, the Foot Society was just getting started. We probably only had about maybe 200, maybe 250 members. Ken Johnson and I sort of spearheaded the push to try to popularize foot and ankle surgery.
Well, in the early 80s, I was approached by our chairman that one of the younger staff members should try to direct themselves toward developing expertise in the foot and ankle, because it was a coming on strong subspecialty of orthopedics. It wasn't quite recognized as that yet, but on its way.
So Keith and I go way back. We were in residency together at the University of Pennsylvania. And to this day, I remember, it was probably 1984, when none of the other residents understood why Keith Wapner was interested in foot and ankle.
I came across all these articles written by this guy named Roger Mann. So I printed them all out and I read them, and took me about 30 times to read through his biomechanics before I finally clicked. And what I remember realizing is we weren't learning any of this. None of this was being taught to us as residents. It was this whole field, it was this whole void.
And then I found my way to the Jim Samarcos and the Ken Johnsons and the Roger Manns, and I could go on and on, but found my way to listening to them at the AOFAS meetings.
So we used to have our annual meeting with the Academy. We then decided that we would have our annual meeting in the summertime. We wanted to be open to anyone that wanted to come, and I think it being inclusive is much better than being exclusive.
The Foot Society members back in the 80s took me in. I felt like family. And it was so exciting to be part of something bigger than my own practice.
The first one was the late Ken Johnson. I was a new member to the Foot Society. I was a nobody in the Foot Society. Nobody knew who I was. And he couldn't have been kinder and reached out and encouraged me to become more involved.
When Roger Mann and Ken Johnson would take different stands on different topics, and they'd go back and forth, and the audience would just howl in laughter at their going at one another, because we would learn so much.
It just seemed to open up. People were more open. You could get a lot of cross-fertilization and discussions with various individuals.
The years 1990 and 1991 in my mind were really a huge transition for the American Orthopaedic Foot and Ankle Society.
And by 91, it had become a real organization. And we'd seen people come in like Luder, who brought us to the educational aspects of a real teaching society.
And I look back on that as a time when we went from a small, very insignificant group in the AAOS to a dynamic, very powerful group that's a voice for foot and ankle surgery in America.
And in the 90s, Greer Richardson, who eventually became the president of the society, who was a wonderful and incredibly inclusive person, was head of the membership committee and did an amazing job at the Academy meetings to encourage people to think about becoming a member of the AOFAS.
We decided at that point we were not going to be exclusive, we were going to be inclusive. If people wanted to do foot and ankle surgery, we would help them get there. And so that started this onwards and upward spiral from 350 people to 1,000 and later 2,000 members. One of the first things that we did in the beginning of that year was to make sure that women had an important part in our society. Again, the old sort of boys club had gender non-neutral bylaws, and that was the very first thing we did, was made them gender neutral. Then the very first woman program chairman was Francesca Thompson, who I chose to lead that effort.
I was fortunate to have as my partner Francesca Thompson. So she was one of the great early women members of this society.
We had Francesca Thompson, who was in line to be the first woman president, and I would have been happy to have worked with her and for her in her presidency. Unfortunately, she passed away before she made it to be president.
She developed a myeloma, fought the good fight for 10 years, wrote a book called Going for the Cure, still a model for the families of patients with myeloma. Because she died, it left a gap.
She encouraged several women to go into the Foot and Ankle Society, and now there are many more women members than there used to be. And and hopefully there'll continue to be more and more.
By 1996, we had an interest in developing relations with Asia, and this came to fruition with the first combined meeting of the AOFAS and the Japanese Orthopaedic Foot Society. From that point, the idea spread, and we did have, for instance, in Europe, Ireland and the AOFAS became involved with combined meetings.
So Jim was kind of the spearhead to bringing societies from South America and from Europe and Britain into our society, and started the international membership, which has grown tremendously.
By 1997, discussions of having the AOFAS, that is the International Federation of Foot and Ankle Societies, formed, and by 1998, we actually had that come to fruition with meetings in New Orleans at the AAOS meeting.
So AOFAS becomes a vehicle for organizing meetings and for communicating among orthopedic surgeons worldwide.
Meetings are now held on a regular basis every 3 years, and this is a wonderful way to have information transferred beyond videos, beyond journals, and beyond personal relations. It is a formal coming together, and the natural development of foot and ankle surgery throughout the world.
We've become more of an international society, and I think that's a great benefit to our membership here in America, but also our membership around the world.
It's grown to be a large international brotherhood of interests in so many different areas of foot and ankle surgery and biomechanics.
Over a number of years, our society has done so much to enhance research.
Mid-90s, I went to the board and I asked them to consider a proposal to have a research grants program. It took about 2 years, but finally the board could see that there might be some value in that.
We as a board felt for quite some time that we needed to get young investigators involved in real research and have more scientific presentations at our program. So we initiated the research grant program, and actually we gave the first grant to the recipient at my meeting in 1998.
We started really small, $25,000 a year, which at that time was a lot of money for the society. And that has continued to grow and grow and grow. And that pipeline of ideas and research has generated many new ideas and many new projects, NIH-funded projects, otherwise funded projects, and has really changed what we can do.
Research is vital to the growth of our society. And it's wonderful to see that as we have grown, the research efforts that are promoted by the society have simultaneously been made available.
So our ability to promote research and to be able to give grants to identify those young investigators who have these seed ideas, and those seed ideas are what grow into things that change our ability to care for our patients.
We're going to really advance how patient care should be carried out, and it's going to be based on the best practices and the best evidence. And what is extraordinary to me is how many members we have that are committed to this mission.
The foundation was started in 2001 as an internal fund within the AOFAS.
Well, I'm not sure any of us knew exactly where the foundation would go when Pierce Granton first discussed this at a board meeting.
At the time, there was really a major stock market crash. We had already seen kind of a reduction in attendance. Everyone was scrambling. You know, payments were still needed to be done. And so I thought, wow, we've got this precious little society with education and FAI International. I needed to do something to help protect the society.
The OEF was born from a non-traditional thought process. This is not what the Foot Society had done, and change is difficult. As it turns out, as Pierce predicted, it gives a moral basis to our society. Everyone who's participated on the overseas missions especially know that.
We started talking about what to do about the landmine injuries in Vietnam, and that you were perfectly willing to start working on that with your own money, which was incredible.
The idea was that we would send doctors over there who would be volunteers, who would operate on disabled children and landmine victims. And we didn't really know where it was going to go, but the response from the membership, from individual donors, the response from corporations was spectacular.
It really is life-giving, life-changing surgery. Our doctors work with the orthopedic surgeons there, the local orthopedic surgeons in the provinces, and then they also work with the residents at Viaduct Hospital in Hanoi.
We have been blessed by the opportunity given to us here in this country and facilitated by the AOFAS. We should participate in humanitarian activities around the world.
The Vietnam Project is a star in the sky of good medical endeavor, good surgical endeavor. Again, Pierce Scranton's commitment and idea.
Look at the traveling fellows that are there now. Look at all of the research grants that are there. So it was a major contribution, and it all sprung out of my fear for the society after the dot-com crash of the stock market in 98, 99.
The society as we know it today was really formed and remade during the 2005-2006 years.
When I finished my tenure on the board, my parting responsibility as a board member was to renegotiate our contract with the management company that managed the day-to-day activities of the Foot and Ankle Society. And the company was based in Seattle, and we were one of their clients. And when I did the due diligence of interviewing past presidents and past program chairs, I started to realize that we probably had an opportunity to do better.
We weren't living up to our potential.
We did a great job with the Seattle office. At some point, our membership grew, and I think it was difficult for them to keep up with the multifaceted aspect of our society. And a decision had to be made on where we should be and what we should do.
Big decision, actually, a very difficult decision that the board made was to leave Cantrell Associates, who had been managing the society prior to that, out of Seattle, and to leave Seattle and to go to Chicago and to hire a professional organizational manager and talent.
The last vote of the board of my presidential year was to revisit the issue of moving to the academy.
The time had come to reintegrate and to improve our relationship with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, to bring ourselves back to the center. So, one of the things that I did as president was to go to Karen Hackett, who was the executive director for AOS, and Stu Weinstein, who was the academy president, and tell them we wanted to move the organization back to Chicago from Seattle.
We met with Zan Lofgren, and we were at the airport, the Chicago airport, and it was, I think we were late getting in, and we sat down about 8 for dinner. We must have stayed till 11 or later. And once Zan went back to her room, we all three gave a resounding yes, yes, yes. And then, of course, we took that to the board of directors. And Zan came on board as our director.
And that was really something, because with a new in-house executive director, for the first time, we built our own in-house complete staff. That means basically an incredible step up in the autonomy of the AOFAS.
I was selected to be the executive director in July of 2005, and I worked part-time over the summer in preparation for the move from Seattle, and then in September started up, hired 2-3 staff, and we started to set up for the society. We were in temporary space for several months, and then the boxes started arriving from Seattle, and we would get a call from the mailroom that a whole pallet had arrived, and then another pallet and another pallet. So about 200 boxes arrived from Seattle, and we went through them to reconstruct and set up the society.
Personally, I want to thank Jim Brodsky, who spent at least 2 or 3 years campaigning and working towards this and helping select Zan and her team and then supporting them as they got started. The transition has made everything to the society. We're in much better hands, and we were immediately in much better hands when this happened, and it's just continued to grow and evolve as a result of that.
The Resident Scholar Program has been one of the best things that we've done in this society.
There were a lot of training programs that didn't have fellowship-trained foot and ankle surgeons within their department.
We needed to encourage young people to come into the field. So we began a resident program that started small, and we have a few residents come to the meeting that were supported by us.
We would provide them with a scholarship to come to our summer meeting, and while they're at the summer meeting, we would assign them with a specific mentor, one of our members, usually somebody that had a fellowship or somebody that they would recognize the name, so there would be a connection. And we really tried to engage them in the process.
This was a very successful program in that the resident scholars that attended the meeting frequently would become our future fellows. And from those future fellows, we had very engaged, new, dynamic leaders coming to the forefront.
This was a time of great transition, and I was at a position and able to lead the society through that period of transition from having an executive director that had been there for a number of years, and we had a great program, and then went through a period of time where we hired an executive director and then hired another one. And it was during this period of time that I think that we needed to make sure that the membership knew that the society was on good footing and that we did it in a way that was respectful to all the parties.
The achievement I'm most proud of while I was on the board is the transition we made by getting Elaine Layton on as our executive director. I think our staff was growing, and it was really neat to see how Elaine took leadership and really changed the way we operated within the society.
She's been instrumental to so many of the things that we're doing now and has proven to be an exceptional ED.
I think that the smaller organization and the smaller group that we started with at my early time on the board has evolved, and it's become a much more structured and much more dynamic group of people with a particular skill set in each individual area, starting with Elaine as the executive director and filtering down. I think every addition that we have had has really caused this group to blossom and to become much more effective and much more nimble in terms of being able to deliver what is necessary to the membership.
It's amazing what has changed in foot and ankle surgery and foot and ankle care just in my career. We see the advancement of technology, education, access to good health care for the public, and things like the evolution of the total ankle arthroplasty, the wound vac, minimally invasive techniques, the mini C-arm, all of these things that have tremendously helped provide more efficient and improved care to every patient with foot and ankle disorders.
The clinical world of foot and ankle care has changed completely. When I started, the first meeting I attended, I believe, was in San Francisco in 1988. There were no standing x-rays, there was no discussion of internal fixation. In fact, in those days, I was chastised by a past president for giving a paper on using internal fixation in the foot, which at the time was considered a little bit out there, but I don't think there's a member of the society now who doesn't do that on a daily basis.
What I think that I've seen over the years is evolution on how to think about the foot, alignment of the foot, position, mechanics, and motion. That's changed dramatically over the years since I started practice in the mid-1990s.
When I first joined this society, we had very few discussions about ankle replacement.
In my time in the presidency, that operation had a very bad reputation because it had a high failure rate.
Jim Nunnally and Roger Mann were the early pioneers in this country that brought total ankles here, fought with the FDA to get approval, did the appropriate work, and because of them, we're now able to do much more advanced surgery.
That we were able to initiate the FDA study with the STAR prosthesis in 2000. This eventually led to the first mobile bearing ankle, which was FDA approved and released in the United States.
There was a lot of times in the early 2000s where we were seeing failure of these prostheses early because they simply couldn't make up with that integrity. And then, but sticking with it and saying, I know we can figure this out and make it better, it really has changed the game, because now you look at the 7 US available prostheses, all of them are excellent, all of them have different structural capabilities.
One of the other advancements that I think has been so important over the years is arthroscopy and its use in foot and ankle surgery.
When I started, arthroscopy was in its infancy, and really we were looking through the arthroscope itself. There were no cameras at first, and so you'd line people up in the operating room to look through the arthroscope and see the inside of a joint. We saw an advancement of the technology to add cameras to the arthroscope. We could put that image up on a monitor, and then you could actually do surgical procedures while looking inside the joint with an arthroscope. And with the smaller size of the arthroscopes, we could get into the ankle joint and do more there, and that's just continued to advance.
It is now, and it has been for a number of years, being used extensively in the ankle and now in other joints and even in tendons around the foot and ankle. This is a technique that I don't think we've even seen the potential yet, and it's something that many of us are doing, and I think there are advancements that are coming all the time.
What I personally like a lot is there's always new innovation. Every time that you think you know exactly how to do a procedure, there's somebody else that figures out a better or more efficient way to do it.
When I was in college, I never thought that this computer would take off, and you could see how wrong I was. But I believe in the future we're going to see technology advancements in our field, as in all orthopedics, that will change patients forever.
When I was interviewing Mel Joss towards the early part of my career, I asked him about the founding of the society and what made it special. And he said that we were all really nice, wonderful people who enjoyed being together and loved the foot and ankle and loved each other. And I think that feeling, that family that he felt he created has been propagated throughout the society, throughout its years.
All of us are a product of those who preceded. And the Foot Society, because of those who preceded, is a very exciting, warm, family-oriented, vibrant, intellectual place.
The society has a different personality than almost all the other subspecialty societies in orthopedic surgery. The group is very friendly, very debative, which is good, but a very friendly group, and it's a great group to be a member of.
And from your day one coming into society, you're accepted as an equal.
In my formative years, when I was just coming out of fellowship training and residency, the opportunity to meet people who had textbooks named after them or who had journal articles that were as long as my arm cited, but that would take the time to actually go over a case or give you some practice advice or refer you to somebody that might have better expertise in that area was really something that impressed me.
Even though we weren't partners, we were in the same town and we were both inquisitive. And you were always sort of a burr under my saddle asking questions that I didn't know the answer to. And that was the great thing, was that you always had the ability to say, well, why?
Being in the AOFAS, I think, has made me and everybody else better. when you get to compare, when you get to learn, when you get to collaborate with your colleagues, it makes you better.
I'll give you an example. At one of the meetings 20-some years ago, I had given up on doing chylectomies for hallux rigidus, and then Brian Den Hartog got up and gave a talk and showed some images of how he did it, and I changed the way I did it, and I'm still doing chylectomies to today just because of what I learned from him at that talk.
If I ever have a question about how do I do an ankle arthroscopy for an osteochondral defect that's very difficult or challenging, I can call Rick Ferkel. Rick Ferkel will pick up the phone and he'll tell me what he thinks about a case, and that'll help me too.
The AOFAS is a game changer because for me, I need that exchange of ideas. I'm fortunate to have partners where we frequently exchange ideas, but where we really get a rich experience is when we go to the AOFAS meeting or we participate in an AOFAS webinar.
I'm constantly stimulated by the influx of great ideas through research, through these presentations, through discussions, all that occur in the environment of our community, at the meetings, at the courses, sometimes online in webinars. These things continuously engage me, challenge me, and inspire me to improve my care for my patients.
When we were in office, we would hope to gather 350 members at a meeting. Now I believe there's 900 members that attend a meeting, which is really fantastic to get that many. And there are over 2,200 members.
We stand for sure in the shadows of those who've spent their whole careers trying to educate, trying to build this society into what it is today.
It's become bigger. It's become a role model for other countries who want to share with our membership and come to our meetings.
Not until I was president did I realize how many unselfish volunteers we have that have busy practices, that take time away from their family lives to make our society strong.
When I did my fellowship in 1984-85, there were about 4 fellowships in the United States. Now, you know, the number is more than 10 times that. So to have witnessed the growth of the field, to see how science has really taken us to new heights, to look at the level and sophistication of our actual practice, our research, our publications, it's unbelievable. What a fantastic, fantastic thing it's been.
When I look back on it, it's like raising a child. I'm not very involved in the decisions of daily issues with the society now. That child is now 25 years older than when I had that effect when I was 40 years old. But it makes me smile deep down to see the success of all these people that had a chance, and now they give young people a chance to participate.
The Foot Society is so dynamic, nothing can stop it. It's just on its way to doing everything at once, and it's financially stable, and the leaders are dynamic, the presentations are good, the journal is good, so we can do anything we want at this point in time, which is a huge difference from the way we started.
If there was one thing I would like to say about AOFAS, it's how incredibly proud I am of the organization, how proud I am of my friends and my colleagues, how proud and honored I am to be a part of it.